Hi, everybody.
Hello, I'm Ryan.
I'm Bethany.
And we are Ryan and Bethany Board Game Reviews.
And today we have a top 10 for you. This is our top 10 multiplayer games that play great at 2.
That's right. A lot of our plays are with 2 players. We're playing with each other. Everyone's trying to play with our family or some friends. But let's be real, 51% of our plays happen with each other at 2 players. So we have a lot of experience playing multiplayer games. Or games that play multiple, lots of different player counts that play well at 2 players. Don't necessarily play best at 2 players. That could be a whole separate list probably. But games that we like that play well at 2 players.
So let me begin. And my first one, my number 10, is China Rails. This could really be any of the rail games, but the
crayon rail games.
Yeah, the crayon rail games. The reason why I enjoy this at 2-player is because it's not as messy. Right? Like if you're doing a lot of stuff, it's easy for things to be erased on accident. And then the turns can get long if you have a ton of players. So this way it comes back to you pretty soon.
Like a 6-player game sounds really epic, but really it's just messy.
And long, and like you'll have to order lunch or something.
Yeah, well, which is, hey, a little lunch never hurt anybody. All right, my number 10, this is Scooby-Doo Escape from the Haunted Mansion. It's an escape room style game, right? But it's not one where you destroy components, so it is reusable in different scenarios. Maybe wait a year between playing it so that way you don't remember all the different, spots, or pass it on to a friend or whatever. But in this game, you have 1 book for each character in the game. So you have 5 books for the 5 Scooby-Doo characters, but only 2 or 3 of them are on the board at a time. And so it works out great because you take a book, I take a book, and we'll just read from that book from our characters' pages.
Yeah.
So that way...
You don't assign a character. You
right.
Can just,
It's not I'm Fred, she's Daphne, or whatever. It's like, I'll be character A, you be character B, and then one of them is going to cycle out at some point, and the other one's going to come in, and we'll swap around or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you do play with more players, it still works fine. You just assign one character to one book to everybody, and as they come in and out, some people read more, some people read less, or whatever. But at 2 players, this works great.
My number 9 is Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, and this is a huge caveat because I really enjoy 2 players how we play it. So we actually play to where we're each 2 characters while we play, and then we go back and forth. So I'll take a turn as one character. I'll be Hermione. He'll go as Ron. I'll be Neville, and then you'll go as Harry. And so that's how we play. And I actually prefer it like this instead of playing with 4 people for a few things. One, the downtime between your turns is not a lot, right? Because it's your turn again. You're just playing as a different player. But also, if you play with just the 2 characters, it's almost too easy. And so you need, so you need more in order to make it...
Or too hard in some scenarios.
Yeah.
Having all 4 characters in play, I feel like is how it was meant to be played.
Yes.
So you have a balance of all the characters' abilities.
There's extra characters, too, as you progress in the books.
Or the expansions.
Or in the expansions that present themselves. But so specifically how we play Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, I love at 2 players.
Yeah, very fun. All right, so my number 9 game, this is Escape Curse of the Temple. This is a cooperative real-time dice rolling game where you are exploring this temple trying to basically get out. But you have to drop off all these gems along the way. And there's going to be a chance where you get kind of cursed by these various curses. And you have to, there's the way you roll the dice, you might get locked up and are unable to roll some of your dice. So when you kind of roam the board together as a pair, you kind of get to help each other out. Someone rolls these masks and are locked up. The other person kind of roll their symbols they need in order to help them out as long as they're in the same spot.
Yeah.
And likewise, when you're in the same spot, you can roll together these special symbols that you need in order to place more of the gems on the board. So it works at 4 players as well, having 2 people going opposite directions, 2 pairs of 2. But having 2 players just roaming the board in a real-time game gives you a lot more control, which you kind of need in order to win this one.
My number 8 is Ecosystem, and the reason why I really like this one is because it has this AI that is fantastic. Like, it still makes it really competitive. When the end game scoring, they count towards the end game scoring as you're shuffling, like, things over there, and it can really mess you up. Like, you think you're going to get something, and you've been making it so your opponent isn't getting anything, but then they get everything, and it counts for them. And I just thought that the AI player in this was really smooth and made the game still extremely competitive.
It's embarrassing when you get beat by the AI.
It is.
Which has never happened. It would be hard to make that happen.
No, but they do beat you out of bonuses.
That's true.
Yeah, they definitely do.
All right, so my number 8, this is Trajan. This is one of those great games by Stefan Feld. The thing about Stefan Feld is a lot of his games work really, really, really well at all player counts. He just kind of builds that balancing into a lot of his games, especially some of the more modern ones, some of the his more recent ones. Not that Trajan's recent by any means anymore, by the way that board game cycles go. But in this game specifically, there's 2 kind of area control spots on the board. The one is kind of worker camp, and one is kind of military camp. And in multiplayer games, and let's say 3 or 4 players, those kind of fill up really easily. You don't get to take advantage of them as much as you might like to, unless you're one of the first ones out of the gate to kind of take advantage of that. But in a 2-player game, you both get a chance to experience and explore both the worker camp and the military camp, and everything else too. But at 2 players, I think you get a lot of bang for your buck.
My number 7 is Viscounts of the West Kingdom, and
So it's not Viscounts?
So anyway, people can be mean on the internet.
That's true. It is Viscounts.
Yeah. So Viscounts of the West Kingdom, and so this is extremely subjective. This is probably the most subjective of all my lists, and the reason why I put this on here is just because I have a very fond memory of a 2-player game that we had where something like amazing happened with the tower, and it was so cool, and we're like, it's amazing. And so when I think of this game, I think of that experience of that 2-player game that we had of it. So it's hard for me to separate it. It plays great, at all the player counts, but when I think of it, I think of that one experience that I had, so it obviously had to go on my list.
Yeah, it is easier to climb up the tower when it's just 2 players, otherwise you can get, people, your meeples get booted off if you have a whole bunch of people trying to do that same strategy. All right, so my number 7, this is Ticket to Ride. We don't often talk about Ticket to Ride as hitting these top lists because it's always kind of right on the fringe, right? It's always like, hey, we like that one, but it's not like it's the top echelon of whatever given category.
The fact that it's on the fringe of so many categories, though, is the reason why it's still here.
Right, the reason we like it so much. All right, so the reason I like it at 2 players, at 2 and at 3 players, you have single routes. There's also double routes, and once one person takes one of the double routes, the other one's immediately closed off. At 4 and 5 players, both routes are open, but then at 3 players, you only have that one route of the double 2, but you have 3 players fighting for it. And at 5 players, you have both routes open up, but 5 people fighting for it. So at the 2 and at the 4-player counts, I personally prefer Ticket to Ride because it is slightly more open to the board. You have a little more opportunity to kind of do whatever your route is. Chances are Bethany might be on the East Coast, I might be on the West Coast, or give whatever map. It doesn't really matter. Or maybe I'm taking North, she's taking South. Or if we do happen to butt heads and we're on the same spot, you can kind of reroute a little easier when it's just 2 people. When it's 3 or 5, let's say, it's just going to be really crowded for you.
But if you play 5 players, tears will be had, and it's great.
Yeah, that's her philosophy. That's what's on my list and not hers.
My number 6 is Quarriers, and I do want to caveat that this is not with the Quest expansion because I feel like that works better with multiple players because you can boot people off of those Quest cards. But I really like this at 2 players because you kind of know exactly what's happening, like with how many die are available, and you kind of know who has what, even if it's in their bag and it's not out and being played yet. And so I like just the fact that it's easier to keep track, for me personally, how I play. I can't keep track of things very well, so at 2 player, I can really keep track of how many of those like expensive die Ryan has as opposed to how many I have, and how that goes about that.
All right, my number 6, this is Game of Thrones, A Hand of the King. In this game, you have a big grid of cards. You're moving one around. Based off of where it lands, you take some cards. And you can kind of set it up so that, your opponent has limited choices. And on top of that based off of their choices you kind of can predict what your next choices are going to be as well. But if you're playing with a whole bunch of people, by the time it gets back to your turn, you have whatever plan you might have had, it's out the window. It's just moved around so much that now you just get whatever you get and don't throw a fit.
Get what you get and you don't throw a fit.
But that's what happens in this game when you play with more players.
Welcome to our preschool class.
They did have these kind of raven tiles that you can use at the higher player counts where you and one other person can kind of go off into a corner when spending one of those raven tokens to kind of discuss where you want to go and what to do and how you can plan ahead so that way you both can mutually benefit from each other's placements. this game's way too light and way too quick to even bother with some kind of thing like that. That's like a 5-hour game of diplomacy-style tactic, not a 10-minute game of shuffling cards around in a grid. So I just put this at 2, so that way you can kind of have a little bit of control and you kind of predict some outcomes based off of where you land.
Side note, like, I really hate that in a game where you're at a table playing a game and the game wants you to leave the table.
Yeah.
It's like, if we did a top 10 of, like, least favorite game mechanics, that might be my number 1.
And shouting things out like, Yahtzee! Or whatever.
What? Do that again?
Yahtzee! Is that what you...
Yeah. So, my number 5 is A Gentle Rain. So, this is an extremely light game.
Excruciatingly light game.
No, it's just, I think I did say that.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't mean it like that.
Excruciatingly light.
It is a very, very light game. It's a super chill game. But the reason why I think this works best at 2-player, well, not necessarily best, but the reason why I like it at 2-player is because every time that we've played it, it's kind of a conversational thing. So we're just talking about our day. We're just planning ahead of what needs to be done that day or what needs to be done that week. And so we can still do something while also just having a conversation as well. And so I like that works like that. So this is a nice one for couples just trying to, like, get through the day talking about stuff or whatever.
And things.
I ended that strong.
Yes, bringing it home.
Stuff or things.
Crossing that finish line with adjectives and nouns.
tripping over the finish line.
All right, my number 5. This is Call to Adventure. In this game, it's kind of a storytelling game. Not exactly, but that's really what you want to do, is you want to tell a story. So you're going on these different kind of adventures, Call to Adventure. And as your character goes on these adventures, you're kind of developing a story. And at the end of the game, you kind of tell that story. And your character kind of goes through drifting towards the light side, drifting towards the dark side. And it's kind of the most fun, I think, at 2 players, because one person can go light, one person can kind of go dark, and then you have very different stories at the end of it. But also, when you have, let's say, a 4-player game of this, everyone seems to then kind of focus on the gameplay itself and really want to maximize victory points and win conditions and that kind of stuff. You also like the storytelling. Come on now.
I do like the storytelling because it doesn't make you, like, it does it for you.
Yes, but when I play at 2 players and both people are committed to the storytelling, I feel like what comes about is this really fun narrative at the very end of it. And maybe you'll be less concerned about the narrative as you're playing with more players, or you'll be less likely to go on kind of a full-on explanation of your storytelling and background of your character and all the stuff that you come up with at the end of it. When you're playing with more players, maybe you get a little timid or whatever. But with 2 people, you're just going to tell, hey, here's what my character's all about, and here's what the story they went on, and here's how it finished for them. And it's really, really enjoyable and satisfying for me.
This is really just Ryan saying that he misses you, Blake and Adam. So, anyway, my
favorite play was with Blake at like 2 in the morning or something at NumiCon 1.
Yeah, I do that, because you guys were like up playing games when we were all sleeping, but you were so quiet about it.
Yeah.
I appreciate that so much. So my number 4 is Point Salad, and the reason why this is fun at 2 players because how the game is divided and how many cards you use per player count. When you play 2-player, you can play 3 games back to back, and there's no additional setup. So you play the game because you've already separated the cards, and then you set it up again, and then you set it up again, like by dishing it out. But you don't have to go through the cards and divvy anything out because it's already done like that. So this is just really sweet. That does it for 3-player too. You can play back to back. You can get 2 games in instead of 3.
Math.
My number 4, this is Ascension. This is the deck building game where it's got a row of cards, and they all kind of, as you buy one, it gets replaced with another one. There's lots of deck building games that kind of do that, and this could be any one of them. But I chose Ascension because it says it plays up to 4. At 4, I really don't like it. Let's say there's a couple cards out there that I really enjoy. I'm able to maybe buy one of them, but by the time it gets back around to me, all the ones that worked for my deck and my strategy are gone, and I'm left with this kind of garbage or whatever. When you're playing at 2 players, 2 people can tend to take similar strategies or even opposite strategies, and that way cards are going to be generally available for them that match their strategy, what they want to do. At 4 players, there's just too much chaos. It goes for too long to get me the enjoyment that I want out of it for that time frame. Yep. 2 players is where Ascension shines.
My number 3 is, Ryan already kind of touched on this, but my number 3 is Castle of Burgundy, and that is just another Feld thing. Like, those games are really well balanced at any player count, and this one is no different. Also with this one, back to, like, the feelings, this is one of the first games that we had in our collection, right? So this is one of the first games that we played all the time. And the fact that we were able to play it all the time, and we played it oftentimes 2 or 3 player, and we still felt like the game was great at either of those. We just have fond memories of playing it. And also, this is one of those games that a lot of gamers consider a game essential. Like, this could fit in so many different people's collections just because of how great and solid of a game it is.
All right, my number 3, I put Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. This really could have been any of the pandemics, and there would have been some applicability there. But I chose Reign of Cthulhu specifically.
Because this is coming out in October, and so you wanted to, like, throw something
That's
on
right, I
there.
wanted to make it spookier.
Yeah.
No, it's because in the gameplay, you have these Shoggoth guys, right? These kind of, like, they're not quite the top elder gods, but they're like mid-manager, like mid-level managers of the cultist world. These Shoggoth guys are running around the board.
Gosh, that sounds like a great book idea. Or like graphic novel. Like mid-level managers of the, what did you say?
Of like the Lovecraftian world.
Yes. Gosh, somebody do that.
So they're roaming the board. They're trying to get to the portal. They always, at the end of every turn, move closer to these portals. If they get to these portals, bad stuff happens that you really don't want to have happen. But in a, let's say, a 4-player game, I'm kind of really close to one. I'm ready to do something about it. But then my turn ends. They move closer. The next person, they move closer. The next turn moves closer. By the time it gets back to my turn, boom, they're on the portal. I couldn't do anything about it. So in a 2-player game, you actually get a chance to kind of control the board a little bit better. I take a turn, they move. Opponent takes a turn, not opponent. Other player takes a turn, they move. Then on my turn, I can actually react and do something about it before they get to the portal. I mean, it is balanced in the sense that they kind of are still moving. You have less. You're in 2 spots on the board instead of on 4 spots on the board. But still, it just feels like in 2-player you have enough control to be able to respond to those bad things that are going to be happening.
My number 2 is Legacy, the Testament of Duke Ducracy. If you've been following our channel for a long time, you know that this is one of my favorite games. So I try to get it in as many lists as possible.
Oh boy, oh brother.
But the reason why I wanted to put it on this list is because it's a table hog, right? The cards are so tiny, so you won't think it's going to be a table hog. But it is as you're growing out your family, and it just takes up so much space. So it's kind of nice that when you're only playing 2 players, it's not like the space is still huge, but it's not everything. So you can still work around with that. And so
yeah, in a 4-player game, like it's like, okay, remember, this is my family, this is your family. It's like,
yes.
They're touching because we've literally filled the table at this point.
Yeah, you gotta get out like the TV movie trays stuff and like put other things on because your family just keeps growing. You honestly don't think it's gonna be that big of a table hog, and then you start playing, you're like, whoa, this is a table hog. If you play with the expansions, like the families, what's it called? 5 families, whatever.
Yeah, the 5 family expansion.
It is better with a higher player count, but just the base game, because you trade and you do stuff and whatever. But as just the base game, 2-player.
All right, my number 2 is Marvel United. I've got a lot of cooperative games on this list, and maybe that's just because we like playing cooperative games at 2 players. I don't know. But the reason I like this one particularly at 2 players, the way the villains start out is the villain plays a turn, and then we take turns playing cards. So let's say A, B, A. And then the villain takes another turn, and then B, A, B, of how we play. And then once the game gets going, we've kind of done some damage to the villain a little bit. Then they play more often, and then they play every 3rd card. So then it's like villain, AB, villain, AB, villain, AB. So in a 2-player game, you always get a chance to have at least 1 turn in before the villain takes a turn. In a 4-player or even a 3-player game, that's not necessarily the case. The villain might take a turn, and then A, B, C, and then the villain takes a turn, and then D, A, B. So then, you don't even get a turn before the villain's taken 2 turns. Oh, that's not good. So at 2 players, you get a chance to have a turn at least every time the villain takes a turn, so you can respond to all the terrible calamities these supervillains are putting on the board.
So my number 1...
And my number 1...
Which we didn't know because we did our list separately.
Yes.
Right? So that just goes to show you how
we completely
awesome this
synced
is on this game is
Quirky Circuits.
Yes. Love this game.
Nope.
This game is wonderful at 2-player. It is a programming game, so it's kind of silly, but you don't know what your partner is programming because all the cards are played face down. And when you play
They have a symbol on the back, like, generally this is a card about turning, or this is a card about movement.
Yes.
But you don't know which way they
one.
turned, or how much movement they did, or if it's forward or backwards for that matter.
So what ends up happening when you play with a 3 or 4 player count, because every player has to play a card, your chances of winning drastically go down.
Right.
Drastically.
And this is supposed to be a silly game, right? This is supposed to be a game
Quirky circuits.
right.
Yeah.
Where you know there's going to be miscommunication based off of what you thought they were playing down. And the first time we actually played, we were actually frustrated with each other. We were like,
yes.
why did you do that?
Yeah.
I was clear what I was doing. After we kind of sorted that out, then we lean into the silliness. Okay,
yes.
Now whenever that does happen, we just laugh about it and it's hilarious. But you still want to win, right?
Yeah.
And if one or two of those things happen throughout a game, you can still recover from it. One of those miscommunications.
Yeah, when it happens every round, you're just like, what the fudge, people?
Which in a 3 or 4 player game, that's going to happen.
It is. It's going to happen. It has to happen. Especially because there's cards out there that mess you up on purpose, and you're required to play those first. And so when you have the 4 player, they're just more likely to be out, so you're more likely to just mess up on purpose anyway.
Yeah, and this game is just kind of great because it's got, 30 or 40 pages to this book, and each page of the book is its own game board with its own rules and its own characters and its own special twist to it. So much game in this box.
We haven't even finished it. We're probably over 50% done by probably even more, probably like 75% done playing the majority of this game, and I just want more. Like, I wish they would come out with another Quirky Circuit book. That's what I want. Maybe one additional character, but you don't even need additional characters because they all have their own programming rules that you could just do another book. You could.
You could.
Nudge, nudge. Okay.
You guys, that was our top 10 list of favorite games that are multiplayer, but we prefer them, or we just think they're great at 2-player counts. So what are some of yours? What are some games that you like to play at 2 players that are not specifically 2-player counts? We had a whole list for that too, so be sure to check that out. If you're into 2-player games, check out that top 10 list that we made.
And do you have any house rules like we do for our Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle game to make them 2-player? We want to know that, so leave us a comment below. Until then, everybody, subscribe so you can see our videos as they come out. You can always find us on Facebook, we're Ryan Bethany Board Game Reviews. On Twitter, we're Ryan Bethany1, and on Instagram, we are Ryan and Bethany.
You guys, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye.